This conference will now be recorded.
Hey, good morning, sir. How are you? Hey, I'm good. I'm good. We've got a good-looking group gathering here. Just wanted to make sure, see if you want me to get started or wait for you. I'm trying to get on, but it keeps telling me that I can't get in. But let me see. I'm coming on there. Oh, okay, great. I see Ashley too. Go ahead and start. Yes, sir. We'll do. Appreciate you calling. Oh, absolutely.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning, everyone. I just got off of the phone with Councilman Hawkins. He's working diligently to join the meeting as we speak. He asked me to ask you all to get started, and so we'll do just that. He should be on the line in just a moment. But in advance of his joining the meeting, there are a couple of housekeeping items that we can begin to look at. And first of all, there's an announcement that I make at every meeting, just so that we can ensure that everything goes smoothly. Please, when you're not speaking, do turn off your microphone. And another tip that we've learned that's been helpful is if you have the meeting on multiple devices, please just use one device. I know sometimes we get up and we have our extra device, but please remember to turn that off if you go away and come back to the meeting. Also, I should bring to your attention that we will have a few items on the agenda today, discussion of the legislation that was on the agenda last time around. As you may recall, there were some additional questions and work that were to be done, and so we'll get an update on CB 28 today. There also is a video that we had intended to show last week that was prepared at the Bridge Center, thanks to Dr. Somerville and her team. And so we'll be able to see the video from last time and get kind of a refresher on what we saw from the Bridge Center. And then the goal today is to see a great presentation about the services that the District of Columbia currently offers. And we'll be able to make a comparison. And then later in the meeting, we will be soliciting some feedback from you via the chat and possibly email. So that will come a little bit later in the agenda. But now to back up, I think I just saw the councilman signing in, or if not, I'm going to turn over to Judge Alexander Williams, who's the facilitator for this meeting. And I just wanted to ask him if he would walk through the minutes from the last meeting, and we can review those and then begin with the business for today. Judge
Yes,
Wood?
yes, more than happy to do that, Mr. Tutt. Thank you so much, and welcome everyone to our meeting this morning on the Reentry Advisory Board. As Mr. Tutt has indicated, we'll move right through the agenda as you've seen it. I'm sure the councilman will be here shortly and give us an official welcome, but the minutes were circulated with the other attachments, so I hope everyone had a chance to review it. Minutes of September 16, 2020. It's a one-page document. So let's see if there's any questions that anyone have before we ask for a motion. All right, hearing none, can we get a motion to approve the minutes?
Good morning. Good morning, Judge.
Yes, good morning.
Yeah. Hi, this is
Ms.
Leslie
Johnson?
Johnson.
Yes, Ms.
Yes.
Johnson.
I believe that at that last RAB meeting, we established the RAB Bridge Center Subcommittee, and I don't think that's mentioned in the minutes.
All right. I do recall a discussion to that effect.
Right. In fact, Mr.
All right.
Simmons is going to give a presentation today on that, I believe.
All right. We can certainly include that in the minutes, make reference to that.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right. Any other observations or comments on the minutes? All right, hearing none, can we have a motion to approve?
I make a motion to approve.
This is Walter, I second it.
All right, it's been properly seconded that the minutes of September 16, 2020, as amended, be approved. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, you say aye.
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 All right, any opposition? Any abstentions? All right, so the minutes of September 16 have been approved as amended. All right, so Mr. Tuttle, are we ready for either Councilman Hawkins or the broadcast?
I think that this would be a good time to move to the broadcast. If Ms. Ferguson is ready, I believe she has the video queued up, and we can take a look at the video.
All right, great. Thank you.
Ms. Ferguson?
One moment, I am getting it queued up for you right now to share my screen. Thank you. Oh, sorry, you guys. Hold on.
Is Shelly on your right where it says in this blue box, there's an X to get that?
Sorry, but my other screen is blocking it. There we go. Sorry, you guys. Here we go.
Passionate about
Shelly, I think we lost sound.
my third year of college at Bowie State. Get caught up in a situation, some armed robberies.
I apologize.
I'm passionate about returning citizens and having an opportunity to lead this reentry advisory board because of what I've been through in my own life. Having at the age of 21 in my third year of college at Bowie State, get caught up in a situation, some armed robberies that I ended up in prison for 5 years and 9 months. And there were individuals I met in there that will never get an opportunity to return to society. And having that 5 years and 9 months with them, it gave me an opportunity to listen to their stories and better understand what's going on in our criminal justice system. And I prayed that if I ever had an opportunity to get out, I would do better.
I served 20 years on the federal bench, and I had a passion for reentry. Not only did I sentence a number of people because my hands were tied with the federal sentencing guidelines, and I always had a compassion for those that I was sentencing to those who rendered sentence. And in fact, at some point, once they were released, I opened my courtroom to welcome them back.
When I speak of returning citizens, I'm speaking about individuals who were incarcerated, who have now finished their sentence, or the parole board is deemed it appropriate for them to return to our communities. And those individuals are coming home. Those individuals are coming home with an expectation that they will do well and become responsible citizens.
Reentry and the plight of those returning from institutions has been very important to me in my life, and I was quite excited for the opportunity to sit on this board addressing issues of the reentry. I was quite impressed with the makeup of the board. They consist of many persons who are in the field of reentry. We have prosecutors, we have defense attorneys, we have nonprofits, we have pastors, we have people in housing, in education, and in the law enforcement area, and all of the stakeholders who have a part in this idea of reentry are assembled together. And it's quite an impressive group of people with vast experiences across the board that affect criminal justice and also the plight of the reentry.
I think it's very important to have a reentry advisory board in Prince George's County because right now we have all these different services from the government side, from the nonprofit side, and they're sporadic. We don't really know who's doing what. So we need to bring all those resources together so that we can have a one-stop shop like the Bridge Center where individuals can come and get what they need.
It's very important that we assist all persons who have records transition successfully back into the community. The community is being assisted and helped by having individuals who have employment. They can take care of their families. They won't have to be saddled and restricted by barriers imposed on them by society and statutes and ordinances. What eventually happens is that once we lift up the plight of those who have records, ultimately the county and our plight is tied together, and we will ultimately improve and enhance as a county.
The Bridge Center is a one-stop shop, as you mentioned, for returning citizens, and the connection between the Bridge Center and the Readvisory Board is an opportunity to get the insight on what the Bridge Center does as we formulate policies and implementing those policies to ensure that we have realistic, measurable goals where we release funding to help the returning citizens. So we're going to use the Bridge Center as the pinnacle and the operational body for how we initially help returning citizens.
Adams House has been a reentry service provider in the county for more than 10 years. Services are provided here that range from access to social services for benefits and entitlement, veteran services, transportation, peer support, assistance with applying for jobs, getting vocational skills and the training that one might need, all of the things that someone would need to get their life back on track.
Persons who are coming from prison, they have barriers imposed upon them. Sometimes they even have mislabels. They have names that are branded them, ex-cons, ex-felons, convicts. We've got to get away from that and make sure that we do not penalize individuals because they made a poor judgment early in their lives. But we've got to welcome them back. We've got to make sure that they have employment, they have skills, they have vocations that they can their way back into society and uplift all of us by what they bring to the county.
These individuals are coming home. They don't have identification. Many of them, quite frankly, have really messed up with their family because of their actions. Many of them don't really have anywhere to go. So they're fighting to come back and do the right thing while not having housing, not having an opportunity to work. And so those two things, their housing and work and that family support system, are three major reasons I believe individuals return to. The absence of those things will put you back into a position to have to participate in criminal activity because you don't have no other means. So those three areas, housing, family support, and an opportunity to work, are the three major things that I think are barriers to individuals remaining free in our community.
It can be very challenging because you have so many things that need to happen in order for you to get your life back on track. And it could be difficult if you're someone who doesn't have transportation. To get from point A to point B, you may get to social services and perhaps you're asked to come back, or you may be seeking mental health treatment and you have to attend weekly, but maybe you don't have a way to get there. And all of that can be so discouraging that it leads the person to kind of just give up and fall back into their old patterns and ways of being. So what we've been able to accomplish here at the Bridge Center is a one-stop shop to provide all of the services that someone might need who is just getting out of incarceration.
The kind of services that those transitioning back to the community best need would be, first of all, adequate training and vocation and employment. So many have been away, and the technology in this world has obviously increased, and they need to be educated and trained with respect to that. Also, many of those transitioning back to the community may have health issues. So they may have psychological, they may have some mental challenges. Some obviously had drug problems, alcohol problems. And we think that the county needs to make sure that we have programs in place to address these social issues, which would assist in their transitioning back to the communities.
What we've been able to accomplish here at the Bridge Center is a one-stop shop to provide all of the services that someone might need who is just getting out of incarceration. And also, through our partnership with the Department of Corrections, Health Department grant-funded employees have been able to go into the jail and begin working with people before they even come out. We provide an assessment and screening to figure out what the needs and services that they might need are, and what might be factors that would cause them to recidivate. We create a plan and we case manage and assist them to meet the goals that they have to get their lives back on track.
The reentry program gives not only the county citizens and businesses an opportunity to understand what we do for these individuals, and as much as we help them to acclimate back into our society, we are setting up responsible individuals, and we are decreasing the opportunity for them to return, and we are decreasing the recidivist rate. And so it's important that not only businesses but citizens understand these are your sons and daughters, your grandkids, and we need you involved to help us and help the businesses understand why it's important to give them a job when they come home and make sure they have every chance they need to succeed out there and not return to prison.
I think it may be hard for individuals to get employment because of the stigma, or it may be hard to access housing. But I believe the community in general is very supportive of the reentry community, and they want places like this because they want for their neighbor who may just be getting out of jail to have the resources that they need.
This board has come together. We've talked about it. We've discussed what we need to do with reference to getting experts and getting research, and just trying to plug the holes and the gaps associated with what programs are available to assist returning citizens.
The importance of the Reentry Advisory Board is an opportunity for citizens, government officials, the private sector, and our faith community to come together and help individuals who are uncertain of their future because they have been incarcerated, and now we have an opportunity to help them. The Reentry Advisory Board will give us an opportunity to collaborate on how best to help. And I'm looking forward to your prayers, your support to help us get to that end. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Shelley, for sharing that video.
Yes.
So this was a project that was put together in partnership with the Bridge Center, for support from CTV that actually came in and did this great production. So we're really grateful to them for supporting us. This is the beginning of a series that we think ongoing will be able to continue to spread the word about Prince George's County's efforts to redefine and improve the reentry process. Again, this was just the beginning. We believe that the Bridge Center was a good place to start. However, in the future, throughout the duration of the board, we want to continue to get to produce videos that we can be able to share among our social networks and get the word out about the great work that we're doing. So thank you, Shelley, for sharing that. So now we're going to move on to the subcommittee updates. We do have Councilor Mel Franklin on the line with us. Mr. Franklin, are you tuned in? And he's going to be giving any updates to the legislation that we discussed, CB 28-2020. There were a couple amendments that were made, and I believe that we're going to be holding off on introducing this legislation until the 2021 legislative year. However, we did think that it was still important to give you all updates on the progress that we have made. So, Councilman Franklin.
Sure. Good morning. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Well, thank you for having me back to the Reentry Board. I wanted to, I think Councilmember Hawkins and I wanted to give an update. The legislation to create an employment incentive for hiring returning citizens. The subcommittee had a good meeting where we had a good exchange of sort of ideas about how to improve the legislation. Because of the deadlines for this year's session, we'll need to proceed with it at the beginning of next year to move this policy forward. Just as a recap for those who may not remember, basically this is a concept modeled after a law in Philadelphia where employers are reimbursed a certain portion of the wages that they pay to a returning citizen who that employer hired. So the employment has to be at least $15 an hour position or greater, depending on if the Maryland minimum wage ever exceeds $15, it'll default to that. But if it doesn't, it has to be $15 an hour paid job, where it's a minimum of 21 hours per week. And then the incentive would function as a reimbursement up to $5 per hour for each of those hours that employee is working, up to a maximum of 40 hours per week and 1,000 hours per 12-month period. So that's kind of how, in a sort of a nutshell, how that reimbursement would work. And the changes we made to the legislation were sort of to target and to sort of focus the assistance of the legislation to returning citizens that are have been recently incarcerated and released. So the legislation now is more narrowly tailored to returning citizens that have been incarcerated sometime in the last 5 years for a total of at least 6 months or more, and that they've been released from incarceration within the last 36 months before getting hired for the position. And of course, they have been a county resident prior to the most recent period of incarceration and a county resident since the release from incarceration. So those are some of the changes. We also made a couple of tweaks based on feedback from the Office of Finance, which they wanted the Office of Law involved in the process for the approval process for reimbursement. And we also made a couple of other tweaks. The Office of Finance wasn't comfortable necessarily being the agency to establish rules and procedures, so we gave that authority over to Employee Prince George's in the legislation, and that pretty much sums up the changes that we made to the legislation. And so what we'll do is we'll reintroduce this in January of 2021. We did, as I mentioned, we did have some feedback from the Office of Finance. That happened during the council committee meeting where this was heard. So we also got feedback from some of my colleagues who were generally favorable to the legislation and are interested in seeing what the final product will look like. Oh, we also added a definition of incarcerated and incarceration so that it's clear what we're talking about when we say citizens, residents that have been incarcerated. So that's on page 3 of the new draft of the legislation. I'm assuming everybody has the updated draft in front of them. We also had some discussion about removing the restriction that it not apply to residents that are listed in a sex offender registry. And I don't think there should be any problem with removing that restriction when we reintroduce it in January. I did want to talk that over with Councilmember Hawkins, just to talk over some of how our colleagues may respond to that. But now that we're reintroducing it as a new bill in the next year, we can just not have that provision in there, and it won't be a matter of that being taken out of the draft. So that's another change that we could also make, because that was some of the feedback from the subcommittee that met on about the legislation. So in a nutshell, that's CB 28, and it will have a new bill number when it's reintroduced in 2021. So I'll turn it back to you, Ashley, or Vice Chair Hawkins.
Councilmember Franklin, thank you so much. Your leadership and your commitment to reentry does not go unnoticed. The councilman's definitely looking forward to relying on your brilliance and your leadership to assist with a comprehensive reentry legislative package going forward with input from the Reentry Advisory Board. So thank you again for your leadership on this legislation. And I also want to thank the other members of the subcommittee as well, who did tune in and took the time to research and review and really understand and comb through the legislation to make it as best possible, as easily implemented as possible with all the goals that we're trying to achieve. So thank you all for that. Were there any quick questions based on the report that Councilman Franklin gave?
I have just one quick comment, and I'd like to talk to Councilman Franklin later about it, but I'm hoping that the county council at some point can pass a resolution urging the General Assembly to, if not immunize, at least minimize the liability of employers who decide to hire returning citizens. Again, some people would want to sue those employers for negligent hiring. And I'm hoping that the General Assembly can at least minimize or immunize, if they can, the liability, so they'll be protected if they make a decision they want to hire, returning citizens. But I can talk to Councilman Franklin about that later. It's not something that the county council can do, because negligence would be issues that the General Assembly would have to deal with. But I'm hoping the council can at least pass a resolution urging the General Assembly to look at that.
Yeah, let's definitely work on, Judge. Thank you so much for that. Let's definitely work on that issue together. That's not even something that I thought about. That's definitely something we should definitely work together on. Good, it's a good idea.
Okay. Thank you.
All righty, thank you, Judge. Next, we're going to move on to our second subcommittee that's been working very diligently, led by our Vice Chair for the Reentry Advisory Board, Walter Simmons, is on the line. Walter, if you want to give an update on the Bridge Center subcommittee.
Thank you, Ashley. We've had several meetings, great discussions. We did is identify, there needs to be more in-depth discussions. We have a great group on this subcommittee, but we did identify 4 goals that we wanted to achieve. Those 4 are identifying Bridge Center gaps in services. The second is identify best practices. The third is identify benchmarks for the Bridge Center reentry program. We wanted to really create a reentry program operated out of the Bridge Center that unites and aligns all of the programs operating within the Bridge Center, and thought that in the first year should be a 100-person pilot. The second is make a proposed Bridge Center budget proposal to the Reentry Advisory Board, with the hopes that the Reentry Advisory Board would make a general recommendation to the County Council to fund the Bridge Center. This is key because the Bridge Center is not a jointly funded, unilaterally funded operation. It's a mixture of several different partners and organizations and government agencies that have a collection of different grants, some that directly relate to reentry, some that don't relate to reentry, but there was some alignment that a returning citizen could use some of those services. But what it lacks is actually direct Bridge Center reentry funding. So we wanted to make a proposal that included several staff members, programming, supplies, information for data entry, staff training and equipment, and also some programming funding for reentry to have returning citizens that have multiple barriers. So those again are four. I'll restate them. Identify Bridge Center gaps in services, identify best practices, identify benchmarks for a Bridge Center reentry program, which is our initial 100-person pilot, and then make a proposed Bridge Center budget proposal to the Reentry Advisory Board. We've also really gone deep into identifying various issues and barriers that are preventing the Bridge Center from meeting its full capacity. Some of those we identified lack of staffing, lack of dedicated outreach, that's including engagement with existing federal and state prisons, lack of partner staff entering into the Bridge Center data system that can be used across the county. The current system is called Efforts to Outcomes, commonly abbreviated as ETO. Lack of housing for participants, and really some deeper connections with, when we go in to look at that, we talk about transitional housing and halfway housing. We've also identified some areas that we were going to present for policy and advocacy. We wanted to do some greater research on the existing Threshold Inc., which is a housing facility funded by the Maryland Department of Public Safety and Corrections, but it's solely serving Baltimore City. So one of the questions that brought up is that looks like taxpayer dollars from across the state to concentrate services in Baltimore City, but there aren't any other housing opportunities paid for by the State Department of Corrections in Prince George's County or anywhere else. But Threshold Inc. is supported from the state website as a private nonprofit receiving funding from the Maryland Department of Public Safety and Correctional Services to provide housing for male inmates in Baltimore City. So that's something that we really wanted to take to our state elected officials to understand what is this and why aren't additional resources being allocated to a nonprofit organization in Prince George's County. Second, we wanted to propose some opportunities to talk with the Department of Corrections. I know Guy Merritt, we want to bring you in and talk to discussions. As we look at issues for housing, we understand that there's financial stressors that are happening related to COVID on the county. So we wanted to identify what are some immediate wins that we could help increase housing, and we wanted to have a discussion about advocating for the Community Release Center to possibly be a transitional house, to be a transitional housing, and talk about what that would look like, what would it take with the Department of Corrections, and if there's additional resources, and how could we advocate that to the Reentry Advisory Board, who could then take it to the County Council, and then possibly look at a latter goal of the Community Release Center, possibly having a contract with the state of Maryland as or the federal government as a halfway house, as additional resource. So that was something that we wanted to bring up, and it was noted that several years ago, the county did operate a halfway house. And we thought that this could be a possible immediate change that was low impact on the budget due to the CRC already being functioning, but definitely need to make some changes if that was the direction we wanted to go in. But that's from a policy and advocacy side. And then lastly, we're really working on identifying leverage resources, taking advantage of our nonprofit, faith-based community organizations, and to ensure that they are partnering and aligned cohesively with the Bridge Center to maximize services for our returning citizens. So we'll be identifying various leverage resources from our faith-based and nonprofit community. So I'm very excited about the Bridge Center. We have a great group of members, Dr. Somerville, Portia Hurt, Ms. Leslie Johnson, Dr. Felton, Latasha Ward, Dr. Ron Garrett, Brother Raheem Jenkins, have really been dedicated and put in a lot of great work. And really, I think we've gone double the amount of time that's been allotted every time, which shows the dedication of our subcommittee. And I just really want to thank our subcommittee for that effort. And we will continue to work and and really go back and to provide in the next couple of meetings, we'll be able to provide a comprehensive report related to those 5 goals, again, of identifying bridge center gaps in services, identifying best practices, identifying benchmarks for the Bridge Center Reentry Program pilot, and then crafting a detailed proposed budget request that to submit to the Reentry Advisory Board with our recommendation to submit that for the County Council. Thank you, Ashley.
Question.
Sure.
Well, I know we have space over there, and as I've toured through the Bridge Center, it struck me that we could use more space. And given what you just reported and opportunities that we, with nonprofits and the faith community, is there any thought of increasing the footprint? Is there even any opportunity to increase the footprint at that location if we're going to add additional services?
Director Gloria Brown Burnett, thank you for the question. Dr. Somerville did identify that there might be a possible suite on another floor in that building, and that is something that we would like to propose funding for to allow the Bridge Center to expand its space. We've also identified the center in Langley Park that also has space that could possibly have some reentry staff member there at the Langley Park Multicultural Center to take advantage of some opportunities there. So we have looked at space, and one thing that we talked about when we started talking about leveraging resources is we talked about a closed closet and all these different things. It was brought up that we didn't have space for a lot of those. So we are looking at, Dr. Somerville mentioned the space and the floor below the current Bridge Center that might be available to see if we can allocate funding so the Bridge Center could expand into that suite. And then also looking at existing other service centers throughout the county that we could find reentry staff member to be in those locations. So looking at a multitude of options.
Great, thank you.
Awesome. Any more questions?
I'd like to make a quick comment, if I could. Walter, you talked a little bit about housing, and I'm very much an advocate for trying to utilize the community release center as best we can, and I look forward to talking about that further. But one thing I wanted to bring up was the Pay for Success Permanent Supportive Housing Initiative that Gloria Burnett Brown and her team were heading up. We put a lot of effort into that and looked at the feasibility of that type of programming. I know that some people have heard about it, but it would be nice to have this group get behind that type of effort to bring a permanent supportive housing program to the county. I feel like the effort that they have put forth, and Gloria, if you're still on the line, maybe you might want to speak to it, would really advance the type of infrastructure that we're looking for people who are returning from institutions like the jail and the prisons.
So Guy, just to lightly go in that direction, the pay for performance concept is a social innovation where investors would invest in a concept, and if it worked and we were able to save money in other parts of the system, we would pay those investors back. And if it didn't work, we would be held harmless. And so we're working, we paused it during this pandemic because we needed to focus on some more emergent needs. But they just reached back out to me earlier this week. And so we're beginning conversations again. And what it would produce is intense housing, with case management services for specifically justice involved people, returning citizens. And, the goal is to keep them from touching other systems, and whereby we would lessen the financial impact on those other systems because we would focus more on creating independence for them early on. So I could definitely get you all a one-pager on the concept, and so that you could take a look at it. And we are at the point now where they are looking for investors. So primarily investors are like foundations and whatnot. So I think we were talking to Kellogg and some other foundations who would make the investment in our model.
Sorry to put you on the spot like that, Gloria.
I think that's great.
Do it.
No, I think that's great, Guy, and definitely Gloria. And that's something that Dr. Somerville will work to kind of bring that to the group. Because the first meeting, one thing we wanted to do is I really truly identify what was existing being provided, what resources were being provided to work on not duplicating. So we really spent the first meeting really doing a deep dive with Dr. Somerville of every partner and everything that was being provided. So we definitely would welcome that. Our group is really trying to identify what is the best housing option, short-term, long-term, and taking into account the various budget implications. So seeing that's something that I know you all mentioned previously, that's something we will definitely follow up. So I'll follow up with you afterwards, and as Gloria as well. So thank you.
Thank you for that. Are there any other comments or questions regarding the Bridge Center Subcommittee? Okay, I'm hearing none. Thank you, Walter, for that update. Your committee, I've been able to tune in as best as I could, and usually after the first hour, I have to jump off because I have another meeting, but you guys are still going strong. So thank you all for your commitment and the deep dive in what you all are doing. Real quick, before we move on to our next point on the agenda, I did want to take a moment to recognize two of our leaders that we have on the call today. Both of them are great partners and leaders in their own right, and addressing and responding to public safety issues in Prince George's County. So first I want to introduce and recognize Sheriff Melvin High. He's waving. If you want to say a few words, Sheriff, feel free. I think you're on mute.
Well, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. It's always good to be with you. And this is such an important issue. It's certainly important to me. It's about trying to help all of our citizens live the best, decent life they can. And so I have great interest in it. And I appreciate all of what you all do and what you bring to this effort. Certainly want to thank our council members for commissioning us as a board. Thanks to Judge Williams for his leadership and insights and his great knowledge of a range of issues. And for all of you, Walter, that was a great presentation you just made. Thank you for your leadership as well. You know, I have an opportunity to move around in the community, et cetera. And so I've had an opportunity on a couple of occasions to simply let the community and others know about this commission, about this board, and the work, good work you're doing. I think our community is 100% behind us. They want all of our citizens, no matter the circumstances they've had in their past life, to have a great life and to be an important contributing part of our community. So thank you all.
Thank you so much, Sheriff. And I also would like to introduce our state's attorney, Ms. Aisha Braveboy, we have on the line. Ms. Braveboy, would you like to say a few words?
Thank you so much, Ashley. I really appreciate it. And thank you also to our sheriff, who has been just a wonderful partner and mentor to me personally. So thank you very much. And of course to Chairman Hawkins and Councilman, sorry, Mel, I apologize. It's been a long morning. Thank you all so much for convening this group. This is excellent. And also to our former First Lady, Leslie Johnson, it's always wonderful to see you. My office is working really hard to ensure that those who are in our justice system who deserve second chances get them. And we're working really hard, and we're also partnering with Judge Williams to help those who are juvenile lifers get a second chance. And we've successfully had a few of those individuals released. They are doing quite well. However, there are so many more that we are going to be considering over the next few months and years. They all don't have the same level of support coming out. And so we don't want them to remain in solely because they don't have a support system on the outside. So I think the work that you're doing here is going to be really important, especially for those who have been in for decades. So a lot of our juvenile lifers have been in 20, 30, maybe close to 40 years. They went in as teenagers and now they're adults. But they have no clue about what life is like on the outside. And certainly they didn't have cell phones and computers and all of the gadgets we have now when they went in. So it is quite a shock when you come out into this world. And so having a group like this who will help them re-enter our communities is so important. And then the other group that we're really working hard on are our emerging adults, those who are 18 to about 26, who commit very serious offenses, a lot of them, but they are young. They certainly have the ability to turn their lives around, but they need support coming out so that they don't reoffend. So again, the work you're doing here is really helpful because then we are able to, as the prosecutor's office, fashion our plea agreements and also ensure that if we want to reconsider sentences, we have the ability to do that in a responsible way because we'll have a reentry process for them that takes into account their special needs, and hopefully they don't reoffend once they do return to our communities. So I think it's a really great way of reducing mass incarceration because those who are in jail often are there because they have presented a danger to our community. But if we're able to have and help them reenter our communities and find positive opportunities for them, oftentimes they won't reoffend. So this work you're doing is really critical to public safety moving forward. And I commend all of you and I'm grateful to be a part of it. I see my one of my deputies, Perry Paler, is also here with you all today. So I have another meeting. I'm going to stay on as long as I can, but if I have to dip out, our office is still represented. So thank you very much and have a wonderful meeting. Thank you.
Thank you so much, State's Attorney, for sharing all the great work that you're doing. It's definitely making a difference, and I can already see the possibilities for the board and your office to work together and push some of these initiatives forward. So thank you. So with that, before we move on to our guest presenter, who will be introduced by one of our very own board members, Dr. Garrett. I did want to just mention and put on everyone's minds that in our next meeting, we will be considering the 5 areas or the 5 points that we would like the reentry board to focus on going forward. So we're looking to establish another subcommittee, which will be on reentry advisory goals. This is just to basically make sure that we are tackling the, I guess, low-hanging fruit, but also considering the long-term plan going forward for some of these bigger, more comprehensive goals that we have, and just making sure that we lay out the pathway and determine the gaps that exist in order to get there. So we're not going to go into that discussion today. I did want to give you all time to think about that, think about your agencies, think about your own personal experiences or conversations that you all have had. Just like Mr. Merritt over here had brought up a great idea that Councilman Franklin and Judge Williams also have brought up ideas as well that would be important to consider going forward, not just in the council legislative session, but also considering that we have the statewide legislative session and the General Assembly coming up as well. So just keeping those things in mind, we want to make sure that we're able to do our homework, do our research, whatever it is, to get it to a point of proposal so that when these legislative sessions do tune in, that we're able and ready to hit the ground running. So we'll keep that in mind. So next I would ask Dr. Garrett to unmute and introduce our great speaker that we'll have for today.
Good morning, everybody. And I'm gonna be brief because we want to give the majority of the time to our speaker. But Kwesi Apreke Gal, also known as JK, is an experienced lean leader and has spent more than half of his career focused on continuous improvements and operations leadership. A 2001 graduate of Ohio State University, JK began his career working in the Maryland State's Attorney's Office. JK's first role in the district government was Director of Quality Improvement at St. Elizabeth's Hospital. He also served as Chief of Staff of the Department of Behavioral Health. All three of JK's roles at DBH dealt with operation, leadership, and management of resources and budgets. In July 2019, JK joined the DC Department of Corrections as the Director of the Resources to Empower and Develop You, or better known as the Ready Center. Since taking on the director role, JK has worked tirelessly with the district's reentry partners, government agencies, community-based organizations, and advocates to further improve and develop the district's reentry system to benefit all returning citizens in the District of Columbia. We'd like to introduce to JK.
Good morning, everyone. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
And we're
Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. I'm going to try to share a screen, share my screen. Okay. All right. So I loved everything I heard this morning, and it actually goes very well with what I was going to present, which is there is a lot to reentry, right? And I've heard all of that this morning. You guys talked about some amazing things involving reentry, but as you can all see, there's so much that's involved with reentry, and that's what we've learned over the last 2 years or so in the district, standing up the Ready Center. The Ready Center officially opened in February of 2019. And just to give you a little background on what the Ready Center is, we're a lot like the Bridge Center, except we don't do the case management, and we are actually on site at DOC, at Department of Corrections. The Ready Center is a one-stop shop. So returning citizens, whether you're coming from DC DOC or you're coming from the Federal Bureau of Prisons, you come to the Ready Center and you receive your government services. From there, we link you to the community-based and the faith-based organizations, and you're out and they do the case management, right? So that's the biggest difference between what I've heard between the Ready Center and the Bridge Center. That's who we are. So what I want to do just quickly, because I know you guys want to have an opportunity, so we can just talk about how we do this in the district. And I also brought Ms. Tawana Stewart, who works for Office of Victim Services in the district. She's my partner in crime in this. We spend so much time talking about how to build this system. It's ridiculous. We were on the phone last night. We were on the phone last night till about 9 p.m. talking about housing, right? It's ongoing. There's so much to this reentry piece. It's never ending, right? So she'll be on the call as well to answer some questions later on. So the title of my presentation is Untangling Reentry, and again, like I said, it goes along with everything you guys have been talking about this morning. You know, how do we figure this out? This is such a behemoth project. You know, how do we untangle this so that it makes sense from beginning to end, right? There's all these little pieces, everything from birth certificates to job, to connecting people with jobs, to connecting people with housing, to connecting people with IDs. There's so many different things. Sorry. So how do we even fund these programs, right? Where do we get the money from to fund these programs? I have to tell you, to stand up the Ready Center, it was roughly about $3 million. Some of that was actually for the physical location, but a lot of that also went to the personnel costs, right? The personnel and the marketing costs. So, you know, it was not a cheap thing to do. And then post starting the Ready Center, we had to figure out ways to continue to fund the different initiatives and the different programs and all the things that we wanted to do with the Ready Center. So that's where my partnership with Ms. Stewart really grew, because she helped me figure out how to do that. So I just want to go right on in. And when I was first approached by Councilmember Hawkins, Nate, and Ashley, I wanted to just sort of look at some statistics just to see what's going on in the nation. And I came up across this Bureau of Justice stats in 2001 that said that 95% of people who are incarcerated will be released to the community at some point. When in 2019, there was 1.4 million people in incarceration, right? Specifically, I narrowed down on Maryland and saw that in 2018, there was 117,000 people incarcerated, 11,000 in local jails. And I don't know how that breaks down by the different counties, Montgomery County, Prince George's County, and so on and so on. So what that led me to say was, okay, this again is really, really important, and it's picking up a lot of steam across the country, right? Because we have a lot of people who are returning home, who need jobs, who need the basic resources just to make it, right? Because if they don't make it, it impacts everybody. It's not just them that it impacts their families. It impacts you as a resident of Prince George's County. It impacts a lot of people down the line. So it is up to us to make sure that we put in the necessary programs and resources to make sure that they succeed. That is our job, right? So that's why we're having this conversation today. At the Ready Center, there's basically 3 steps. This is high level. This is very high level. There's pre-release, there's at release, and then there's post-release. The pre-release is because we are on site at the DC jail, we actually walk into the jail and do and work with the case management, work with the program units, and also the clients themselves, just to find out what they need. We have a form called an interest form that we send to them and let them fill out. And and on the interest form, we list all the government agencies that are part of the Ready Center, and they actually go through and say, I need this, I need that, and so on and so on. And then also we provide them information on the requirements to those things. And we'll talk a little bit more about the requirements. I've had some conversations with some of your members about how do we strike up some of these deals with like DMV? Well, it's based on their requirements. We come back and we share those requirements with the people in the at DOC, who also share that with the clients, so that when the clients are getting out, we make sure that they have these things, so that when they come to our office, it's boom, 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 and they're out, right? So we don't spend a whole lot of time trying to figure stuff out while they're with us. They come to us already knowing what they need. So that's a lot of the pre-release work, right? Just going out into the jail. It even starts at orientation. So if someone is admitted today, there's orientations usually on every Friday. My team is out there at orientation. They talk to them about who we are, because we know that they're going to get out. DOC is not a permanent stay, right? It's a pretrial place, right? Majority of the people who are at DOC get released back into the community. So we have a conversation with them. We tell them about all the community services that are available, the faith-based services that are available. We tell them about all the government agencies that are available within our shop, and then start to have that conversation so that they know whether they're there for a week or they're there for a year, they know that we're there and ready to help them. At release, they physically come to the Ready Center, and we are behind the jail. And there was a reason why that was done. Again, I think I heard someone say earlier about transportation. Well, we know that transportation is a barrier, right? Is a barrier to returning citizens. They don't have a way to move around. And I know in Prince George's County, it's probably more problematic than in DC. DC is very small, and we have our metro systems, we have the bus systems and everything. So in Prince George's County, I'm sure it's even more problematic than it is here. But with what we set up, they just walk behind the jail, they come into the center. We already have their information because we did that at pre-release, right? We got all that information and we put it into Apricot. Apricot is actually owned by the same, it's owned by Social Solutions, which is the same company that runs ETO. And I heard someone mention that before. So we put all that information in Apricot. They come in, we pull their information, and then we just triage them in the office, right? Because in our office, we have all the government agencies. They all have a seat in our office. So DMV is in our office, Department of Behavioral Health is in our office, Department of Employment Services, Department of Human Services, they're all in our office. The community-based organizations are not in our office because we make referrals to them. And that's part of the post-release activity that we do. we assess their needs because we provide all these government services, but then folks may need food, folks may need clothes, so folks may need assistance getting their birth certificate or their social security card, right? Those are things that we don't provide, but based on the MOAs that we've created with our community-based organizations and our faith-based organizations, we're able to make direct linkages to those CBOs to say, hey, I'm sending you Jane Doe and she needs XYZ. You send them on their way and boom, 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 they get what they need. All right. So during my conversation with Ashley, Councilmember Hawkins, and Nate, we had some questions. I had they gave me sort of the scenario of what you guys are trying to do, and I sort of shot back with a whole bunch of questions, and that's sort of kind of what I wanted to do this morning, is just sort of throw these questions out to the members on this call who are working very diligently to establish a one-stop shop, you know, like the Ready Center or like the Bridge Center, right? And so that's sort of kind of my agenda for today. And I promise it won't take long because, again, I want this to be more discussion. As you know, I'm sure you guys have a ton of questions for myself and Ms. Stewart. The first question is, what do you guys want to be, right? A one-stop shop or case management shop? They're two very different things, right? The funding for that is very different. Again, for me, what we do with the Ready Center is we are a one-stop shop. You come in, you are linked to the services that you told us that you needed prior to being released, and we send you out into the community. You don't really come back unless, let's say, you needed your birth certificate to get your ID and you didn't have it at that moment. So I say, okay, go to this community-based organization, get your birth certificate, and then come back. That's the only time you come back, right? But we don't do case management. We have MORCA, the Mayor's Office on Returning Citizens, which sounds a lot like the Bridge Center. They do case management. MORCA's been in existence for a while. Prior to the Ready Center being open, the way MORCA operates is you go to MORCA and say, hey, I need my driver's license. MORCA then will send you to DMV. What the Ready Center does is we don't send you anywhere. DMV is in the Ready Center, meaning they have a booth, they have their cameras, they have everything. And so if you have your requirements, you sit down in a chair, you fill out a piece of paper, they take your picture. They give you a provisional ID that's good for 6 months. Now, let's say you did come into the Ready Center with your original copy of Social Security and original copy of your birth certificate and 2 proofs of address. You could actually get your real ID, your 6 or 8 year real ID in that moment. So you never have to go to DMV and spend the whole day, half a day, just to be told you got the wrong documents and come back later, right? Because that's where we lose our returning citizens, right? Whether you've been in jail for a year or 40-something years, where I've had people come into my office who've been locked up for 40-something years and they have no idea where to start, right? The last thing you want to do is to send them to a place like DMV for them to be completely confused. They'll give up. They'll give up. And so that's what we do at the Ready Center. We make sure we get them everything that they need on the spot. Before they walk off campus, they get everything that they need, right? So, you know, that's a decision that, again, I would like for this committee to think about. Do we want to be a one-stop shop or do we want to be case management? As I believe Dr. Somerville, said, you know, with her establishment, you have everything in there. You also have the case management piece where people are doing that ongoing. Case management, you know, you never know how long that can go on for, right? I know I put an endless on here, but it could be, or sometimes it could be short. We want to make sure we are a one-stop shop. Who do you want to serve? At the Ready Center, we serve people from the ages of 18 and above. We don't serve anyone 18 or younger. Again, they have very specific requirements. And so we just make sure that we stay away. It's very hard to meet the needs of the younger population for us at the Ready Center. Plus, in DC, we have DYRS, Department of Youth and Rehabilitative Services, and they do that work, right? So we sort of kind of divide that right there. Also, DC laws, you know, if you're 18 and younger, you have CFL. there's another sister government agency that's involved. It gets tricky. It gets really, really tricky, right? And so again, that's a decision you guys have to make about who you want to serve, because they have very specific requirements, very specific needs. And if you don't make that decision ahead of time, it gets when you entangle things, it just becomes really difficult to untangle. The other question that I also had for the committee is, are you just servicing folks who are returning from Prince George's local jails, or are you also servicing the folks who are coming from BOP, right? So you have Prince George's County residents who may have done some time somewhere else, but they intend to come back home to Prince George's County, right? So again, the decision has to be made. Do we intend to serve them both? When we started the Ready Center, we were just servicing DC residents, DC residents who were in DC jail. Our intention was to do the Bureau of Prisons at a later time, but we quickly realized that that wasn't going to work. So again, the Ready Center opened February of 2019. By April, we were doing BOP as well, and that's a learning that was a learning curve as well. And the reason why is, again, they have different requirements. It's easier to strike up a deal with our DC jail on these are the things that someone's going to get released with that allows them to get the services that they need within the Ready Center, versus trying to communicate the same thing to BOP. It gets really, really dicey. Sometimes BOP wants to work with you, sometimes they don't want to work with you, right? And so when someone comes to the Ready Center, and I'll use Medicaid, for example, where we just need a face sheet, right? Some BOP centers, when the returning citizen leaves the center, they leave with a face sheet. Most places they don't leave with a face sheet. So then it becomes this back and forth with BOP. I need this in order to give this person that service, right? And so it gets really, really tricky. And again, we decided in the very beginning that we will start with DC residents and then sort of kind of work out the details of that later on. But we realized quickly that folks were coming in, as you guys have identified, they wanted the service. If you build it, they will come, they will come. And so once they realized that there was something like the Ready Center, we had a ton of people coming from BOP telling us we need. We had a ton of attorneys and the judges and everyone else saying, hey, I have someone, I'm making this a conditional release. The condition is that they will come to you and get these services, right? So we had to jump on that real quick and make something happen. But even to this day, I'm having this conversation with you, that's still not a well-oiled machine right now, the relationship with BOP. It's not as well-oiled as it is with our local jail. So again, that's something for you guys to think about as you're moving forward. Excuse me one second, I'm having a difficult time moving to the next slide. Okay, and then who should be at the table? Who should be in the center that you want to build in the future? As I mentioned to you, we have specific government agencies that all sit within the Ready Center. They physically sit in the Ready Center. So again, when a resident or returning citizens or participant, whatever, however you want to describe them as, when they come to the office, they just triage from one station to the next, to the next, to the next, right? Based on what they need. So we have Department of Motor Vehicles who, of course, deal with the IDs. We all know that in this country, you can't do anything without an ID. You can't get a job, you can't get housing. ID basically prevents them from doing a lot. So that's that was a must when we talked about opening the Ready Center. We had to have motor vehicles in the building. And then also they get assistance with their record issues. Oftentimes, if you have fines, unpaid fines, parking tickets, whatever, you can't do certain things. So they're in there to also assist them with that as well. We have Department of Human Services that's also physically there to provide Medicaid. They do the Medicaid application and the food stamps application. There's also a host of other services that they do, but these are the two main services that they must do. Our Department of Human Services has a ton of training programs, job development programs. So sometimes when someone applies for some of these things here, they'll ask them, are you interested also in blah, blah, blah? And if they are, then they'll move forward with applying for that as well. We have Department of Behavioral Health also on site, and they also link the returning citizens to mental health providers or substance use disorder providers within the community. They even go as far as to schedule their initial appointment and sometimes even drive them to that initial appointment for them, with them, just to make sure that they make it and they go there and that they do that warm handoff. We also have Department of Employment Services that's physically on location to help assist with the workforce development stuff and also link to jobs. When the Ready Center, when DC government was having the same conversation that I'm having with you guys now about opening up the Ready Center, one of the things that they said they were going to do was make sure that Department of Housing was included. Department of Housing ended up not being included, but now we're doing a lot of work trying to bring Department of Housing back to the table so that we can, again, figure out transitional houses, housing, other assistance for housing, whether it's vouchers or whatever the case may be, because that's a huge barrier, especially in DC. It's a huge barrier. And as I mentioned to you, that's what Ms. Stewart and I were on the phone last night talking about, trying to figure out how do we in FY21 kick off some initiatives for housing, right, that we can refer folks to as they're coming back home. We've looked at other cities, Cook County, Chicago. They actually have a system that will not work in DC just because of the limitation, but they actually use trailers. They have trailers on site just as a short-term housing fix until they can actually move someone into more of a transitional or permanent housing. So we're actually working with some partners around the country right now, just looking at how they do housing, trying to really build on the housing first model. And then this is really the key to the success here, is how you work with the community-based organizations and the faith-based organization, right? Again, the Ready Center is this much of the work. Really what happens from there is when you make that linkage to the community-based organization and the faith-based organization, they take over from there, right? So your relationship with the faith-based organization, the community-based organization is going to be pivotal to your success. It really is going to be pivotal to your success. All right. I think, as I heard, but the budget is really key. Really key. None of this stuff is cheap. None of it is cheap at all. As I mentioned to you, the Ready Center, to start the Ready Center was roughly about $3 million. Of course, that dropped in the second year because a large part of that money went to the physical building, right? But we still have the government funded the staffing and then also funded sort of our marketing, right? And which I'm going to talk about in a second because that's also very important. And then from there, what I've done myself and Ms. Stewart and others, it's come together to figure out how to obtain more money. There's a ton of money out there. There's a ton of money in the country right now for reentry. If you go around the Second Chance Act, Department of Labor has a grant. There's a ton of money out there. That's really how you're going to sustain. That's really how you're going to sustain, So I know I had a conversation with someone from Prince George's County recently about as far as how you guys work out, because DC we're all state and local government all in one. It's easier to work that relationship up, right? But because you are a state, how does that work? If you go and apply for a DOJ grant or a Department of Labor grant, right? But those are discussions that you guys have to have because the government could only support you to a certain point, and then there's a ton of money out there that you can get to support the programs that you build moving forward. All right, so the last thing I just want to touch on is collaboration, and marketing. Your relationship with the community, start there immediately. And I know I've heard when you guys were talking earlier, some discussion about this, and I applaud you for it. Start that immediately, right? Your relationship with the returning citizens, get out there and start telling them what you're doing. The biggest thing with returning citizens is trust. If they don't trust you, they're not going to buy in, right? And that's something that I had to work very hard in building when we opened the Ready Center, right? there's so many different layers of mistrust. I'll give you an example. Someone came to the office one time and we gave them a smart trip card to be able to move around in DC. They refused to take it. And when we pressed them as to why they refused to take it, their response was, this is just another way for you to track me, right? The government just wants to find another way to track me. The trust is so key. And you also need to get to the family. You need to build trust with the community. You need to build trust with the family. You need to build trust with the returning citizen to make what you're trying to do work. And you got to do it before you even begin this, right? And that's why I mentioned get out there with outreach events, some town hall events. Just get out the information quickly, right? Also, your relationship between whatever site you decide to build, the relationship with council, the relationship with the community-based and the faith-based organizations is really, really critical, right? All these things have to work together to make this work. All these pieces have to work together. So I encourage you, I know you guys are doing a wonderful job right now having this meeting, but I encourage you to find a way to sort of push this up and start bringing in some returning citizens. Also, the other thing that also works in my benefit is at the Ready Center, we actually employ some returning citizens. That was the mayor made that very clear from the beginning, that there has to be a certain number of the staff members had to be returning citizens. And I think across DC in many of our programs, that's something that we're all instituting, right? As Ron told you, I come from the Department of Behavioral Health. I spent almost 8-9 years at Department of Behavioral Health, and we built a peer it wasn't called Peer Navigator. It was a peer program, peer certification program, right? And those peers who graduate from that program, they come back into the system, whether at the providers or at Department of Behavioral Health, and they work in the system, right? It creates that believability. And so what I've been doing with Ms. Stewart and other folks is also trying to build a reentry peer navigator program. So taking folks who are returning back to the community, putting them through education and training and workforce development, and then finding a way to employ them back in the system, right? And so that the whole concept is that once I graduate from this peer program and I work at the Ready Center, that person who comes out maybe 6 months after me, I'm going to be connected to them and I'm going to help them back into the community, right? Because when you have someone who has the same experience, the trust is there versus someone who does not have that experience, you know? So that's something that I'm working on very diligently right now with Ms. Stewart and others in DC to build. That's one of my fiscal year 21 initiatives. There's a lot more to do. Housing, like I mentioned to you, is a huge issue, right? Trying to build more capacity for our providers so that they can provide more services is a huge issue. So, you know, there's a lot of work to do. There's a lot of moving parts. And to me, from what I've heard this morning, from the video I saw to the discussions I heard, you guys seem to be tackling all of it. So with that, I'll open it up to questions.
Thank you, JK, for your presentation. If anyone has any questions, you can go ahead and either put them in the chat or take yourself off of mute and ask your question. Or maybe you did such a great job that everyone has lots to think about and reconsider when they go home until our next meeting.
Yeah, I want to make myself available to you guys. You know, like I said, there's a lot of, you know, Ashley, I shared with you the last time I spoke to you, there's a lot of movement. And to honestly say that we knew it all when we began, no. We literally had to figure it out month after month. And tell you, Ron will call me sometimes and say, hey, JK, what do you think about this? And I'm like, I don't know. Let's figure it out. Let's do the research, you know?
JK, this is Walter. Thank you for your presentation. If you wouldn't mind, what is the, after your funding, the initial funding to build out, what has been your continued annual funding from DC government?
So we have the staffing, and the way the staffing has worked, we actually put the money in the specific agency's budget, right? So I'm not holding all the budget. What I do, I manage co-located teams. So I have a DOC team that I manage, and then I also have people from Department of Behavioral Health, Department of Human Services. But for their staff members, what the mayor has done is put the money for those staff members directly into their budget. So they have a Ready Center line item in their budget to make sure that they provide the staffing to provide. So for my staffing, I can tell you if because I was looking at numbers recently. Let me let's say about 1.5.
I'm sorry, JK, please hold 1 second. If you are not speaking, please mute your microphone. We get a bit of feedback and that may help. Thank you. I'm sorry, JK, please proceed.
Okay. So I would say that roughly about a little over 1.5 for the staffing. And then, like I said, I get grants from other places for additional staff. And I have about 6 new staff members, somewhere between 4 to about 6 new staff members that I'm going to be getting this coming fiscal year, but they're all going to be supported by grants, right? And so that's why I was really making the point that you're not going to support your entire program off of what the government is giving you. It's really, really essential that you bring in a grant writer and begin to do that work. The money is out there. I kid you not, the money is out there. It just takes some work, right? You just have to find it and do the work for it. But for that initial setup cost, it was about $3 million. And for the continuing, I want to say maybe, let's just say about 1.5, a little bit over 1.5.
Thank you, JK.
No problem.
Just a little bit more clarity on the positions. Which of the positions that are specifically funded by DC for reentry? Well, the Ready Centers are reentry. What specific positions are funded by the district government?
Okay, so you have the director position, and then you have navigators. So the navigators are the ones who go into the jail, and remember when I said pre-release, at release, and post-release, right? The navigators do a lot of that pre-release work and at-release work, right? So they're the ones who are going in there and they're engaging with the returning citizens about what their needs are and educating them about what services are available at the Ready Center and beyond the Ready Center, right? And getting all that information and then coming back and triaging those services and linking them to those community-based organizations. That's the bulk of my staffing. I also have outreach specialists who works with community liaison, and the community liaison is funded through a grant with Office of Victim Services, and that's where Ms. Swana Stewart is the manager of that, to basically do the community engagement. So that community liaison is the one who's out there in the streets working with the CBOs, the faith-based organizations, again, just to ensure that capacity exists, right? And if there's any issue, they're helping them out. Again, I want to stress to everyone, your relationship with the community is vital to the success of this program. So if the community is falling apart, it's only a matter of time before you're going to have a problem, right? And so that's why that community liaison, their sole role is to be out there talking to the community-based organization, how are things going, how are you doing, what do you need, what's your data looking like, all that stuff. So that's the bulk of the folk. Oh, and then you have, of course, the co-located staff. So again, Department of Behavioral Health has 3 staff members on site. Department of Human Services has 4 staff members on site. DMV has about 6 staff members, but they're not on site at the same time. They just rotate monthly. And then DOES has 1 staff member on site. Then we also have our relationship with MORCA. MORCA's not on site, but MORCA is just picking up the phone and saying, hey, I'm sending you, someone just came to the Ready Center, we got them their ID, we got them food stamps, we got them blah, 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 but they're gonna need ongoing case management. And so we're sending them to you now. So we do that referral to Morka, and then they pick it up. But Morka is part of the Ready Center, right?
Mhm.
Don't physically sit in the Ready Center. So that's how we work with our case management piece, right? We don't do case management in the center, but we have our relationship with Morka. And when I came into DC, that was the question that everyone asked. So what's the difference between you guys and Morka? Morka does the case management, we just, right? And also, let me stress to you guys, for the Ready Center, when the rule is that you come to the Ready Center within 24 hours of being released to get your services for DC residents, right? For Bureau of Prison residents, it's 45 days, right? Because you could be coming from California. So it'll take you much longer to get here and learn about who we are and then, yada, 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 and get your services. What we've been doing a lot of this year is also connecting with the Bureau of Prisons. So CISO, so for example, has, I know I'm saying this wrong, but it's like a community day or something like that, where they actually do a live feed into several different BOP facilities, and people talk about services. So we participate in that. Prior to COVID, we were also working with Morka and others to actually go to these different facilities and BOP facilities specifically, and share flyers with them and tell them about Ready Center and tell them about the services, so that when they get here, as soon as they touch the ground in DC, they know we exist and they can come and seek us out. Yeah, so those are the staff members that are in the Ready Center, and it's paid for by the Ready Center. I'm sorry, paid for by DC government. And I would tell you, so, one of the things that I felt was missing when I came through is, we have Department of Health, right? But I didn't have anyone from Department of Health. And Department of Health has a ton of providers in the community. So I worked with some of their staff members, and we applied for a CDC grant this year. We were awarded that grant. So now I'm going to have someone on site for the next 5 years from Department of Health, so that when someone comes through the Ready Center and they have HIV or hepatitis or whatever the case may be, we can link them to those Department of Health programs, right? And so they can get services. And that also it's not just services for them, but also for their family. Because the thing that we also learn oftentimes is that it doesn't just stop with the person, right? Because if I'm returning you back to a difficult environment, that will impact whether you succeed or you fail, right? And so in some instances, we also go beyond the person and look at the family and see what the family may need as well. I did have, I made note when you guys were talking earlier, and unfortunately, because of COVID, I don't know how this can happen. We actually at DOC do what's called reentry simulation. And I think that it would be amazing for this group to partake in this reentry simulation, because what you do is about 2 hours long, and literally you come in as an inmate and you're given note cards, right? And your note card says something specific about you or what you can and can't do. And really, it's eye-opening when I took my staff through that simulation and started taking other people through that simulation, just to see how difficult it is, right? Oftentimes we think about, oh, well, they're released from jail and they come home and we just give them this and they're okay. There's so much more to it than that. There's so much more to it than that. And so I've said to Ms. Stewart a lot of times that I actually would love to get the community-based organizations to come in and do the simulations so they can see how they connect to each other, right? Because we often say, oh, give someone some transportation. That's cool, right? But how far does that transportation go, right? Or the example that I always use is, we just connected someone to an interview. They have a job, great, 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 but they also have to meet with their parole officer at the same time. How do they make that decision? Because if you don't meet with your parole officer, you have this issue. If you don't go to the interview that we've been working for to get you for over 2 months, you lose a job, right? This is really the things that if we all get together and go through the simulation, it will say, okay, parole officers and potential employees need to communicate and work together, right? Because when they don't, the person that it impacts is the person in the middle, is the returning citizen. This also, so we can give folks, service after service after service after services, but if we're not really talking as a unit, right, that's servicing this person, then we're also contributing to their potential failure. right? And so I wrote that down on my notes. And if we were not in the COVID era, I would go back to the trainers and actually recommend that you guys come down for that. I still may recommend it, and they may have a, there may be a way they can do it virtually. I don't know. But it was actually something that they did in a large room with tables, and people actually walked around, and then we actually held discussions, after every 15 minutes, like, okay, well, tell us what you experienced, and you just see the look on people's face, like, wow, this is difficult, right? Right.
Question for you.
Mhm.
Hello?
Yes.
What is the educational component of your program? Because I didn't hear you talk much about going into the academic field or the educational area and training these individuals coming back into the environment.
So when you say educational component of the program, at DOC, we have a whole, we call it college and career readiness. And so the residents of DOC have the opportunity to be part of the college and career readiness. Prior to COVID, they had classroom settings. We actually have an MOU with Howard University, Georgetown, Ashland University, and I think 2 others, where residents of DOC who were actually interested could actually receive credit. We actually, when I started last year, we actually had 3 people who graduated with an associate's degree from one of the programs. I think it was the Georgetown program. In some of the programs, even if you get released prior to the end of the program, you could actually continue post-release, right? So DOC has that. As far as programs that we link them to, as I mentioned to you, the Peer Navigator program that Ms. Stewart, myself, and others are starting, I am right now in talks with UDC and others to create an MOU, MOA, so that when folks go through this program and they identify sort of, okay, well, I want to get my associate's degree, then I can send you to UDC with some of the funds I have, right? And you can take a certification program. Or I've actually been in talks with a lot of CBOs who now want to do work with us, who provide avenues for folks to get their GED, right? So these are all things that I'm building on now, but that's the post-release stuff that I'm working on. Prior to release, the jail actually has a whole education component, a whole training, all of that stuff.
And where are you seeking funding to extend the educational part of it? Is it self-funded, or do you go out and seek federal funding?
I go out and seek federal funding. So again, you tie it into workforce, and you go and apply for those labor funds, right? Or even DOJ will have some funding there as well. But if for education is always tied into employment and workforce development. Department of Labor is the place where you want to start.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. And also, let me, and Ron, correct me if I'm wrong. The link that you sent me about 2 months ago, where I think they consolidated all of the potential funds onto one website. I think it's about 17 different federal agencies and Department of Education, all of them. So Department of Education might be another one. And so I don't know if this group has that link, but if you're interested, that's something that I know, Ron, you have the link. I'll have to really dig through my emails, because I remember you forwarded it to me, for this group to look at about potential funding down the line. But again, as I mentioned before, because of the uniqueness of Prince George's County in relationship to Maryland, right? I don't know how that works if you apply for it, if you can apply for it as Prince George's County, or if it is applied for at the state level, and then I don't know how that works. In DC, it's very different because, where everything's very much smaller than that. So I can go after these grants myself.
And I will make sure that I share it with everybody. But it is a little bit of both. There's some levels of funding available via the state and some federal, but one of the first things that the new reentry czar, Mr. Tony Loudon, did when he came into office was to put all reentry funding available throughout the 17 major federal agencies under one umbrella on one website, so that the process, to kind of streamline the process for the obtaining the information.
Right. Ms. Stewart, Tawana, are you still on the call?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay. Is there, because Tawana is a wealth of knowledge, and this is how we just met last year, and we are like this now. Like I said, the two work together. You can't have one without the other, right? And so I just want to give her a chance to also just, talk about what we're experiencing and how we're dealing with some of these issues that are going to appear for you guys as well.
Thank you, JK, and thank you everyone that's on this meeting. Just a little bit about what I do in the Office of Victim Services and Justice Grants. I serve as a state administrator for all of the Department of Justice funding, specifically to the JAG funding, or Burn, Edward M. Burn funding. So just to kind of give you a little snippet of what we do is we fund all of our JAG dollars, our annual formula funding, to community-based organizations that provide services, whether it be pre-release or post-release services to returning citizens within the district. We also have a lot of local support from our district city council. So that is how we are able to fund and partner with, again, our sister agencies like the Department of Corrections to support services for returning citizens. I think it's very important to kind of, understand how you can do it. You can do the work, but you've got to definitely have the funding, but also to identify those partners who have demonstrated capacity to be able to perform, provide those services. I was glad to hear, I think a gentleman spoke about ETO. We also use efforts to outcomes to collect data and to be able to use that data when we're making funding decisions, whether it be making grant awards, or even on a council level when some of our community partners are going to council to ask for specific requests. So one thing, like I said, it's important to make sure that you have the necessary financial resources in place, because without that, a lot of these community-based organizations cannot do the work for free. Some of them do it, but a lot of them can't do it. And so again, you follow the breadcrumbs. I don't know if the funding comes straight from the state, and it's a trickle down effect to the different counties and other municipalities who work with returning citizens. But like I said, for the most part, my agency, myself, I work with a plethora of community-based organizations to get this work done. And it is critically important to have them working together. Oftentimes, everyone doesn't work well together, but for the most part, they do. Because again, everyone can't do the work. And that's why it's important for partnerships to be able to give that warm handoff when that individual comes into your organization and they have a need that you can't meet. It's important for there to be a collaborative effort from the government, as well as to the community, as well as the faith-based organizations. But again, if you have any questions, please feel free, to reach out to myself. Definitely, JK, we are here as a source of support, especially for this population of individuals. So thank you all so much for the opportunity to speak.
And Dr. Somerville, I would love a chance to come by your facility and tour it. And also, I have some residents who are released from DOC, who are Prince George's County residents, and oftentimes well, up until this meeting, I didn't know where to send them, because we can't service them in DC unless if they choose to become district residents, and now I know you, I know where your site is, so I can now give that information to my staff, so that we make that warm transit handoff to you now. So I would really love to come and see your facility.
Jake, I have one other question, if I could. Being that you have a collaboration of other governmental agencies that are housed in the Ready Center, do you all have a common reporting system that everyone is required to say provide their referrals and record any information that's being shared with the clients for reporting purposes,
Absolutely.
like PTO? Okay.
Yep, absolutely. That's what I mentioned before. Apricot. It's called Apricot.
Okay.
Apricot is the sister system to ETO. They're both on Social Solutions. They're both owned by Social Solutions. But Ron, I also would like to tell the group about LinkU, which is a system that we connected with this year through our partnership with Department of Health. LinkU is actually a national it's a national system where you can make referrals. Any CBO, any nonprofit that has a 501c3 designation is in LinkU, right? All you have to do is just go in there and claim yourself. The beauty about LinkU is, as I was saying to Dr. Somerville, I'm sorry, a second ago, if someone is being released from DOC, and let's say they're going back to Iowa, normally I would say, I can't, there's nothing I can do, right? Good luck, right? But LinkU actually allows me to now say, okay, well, what zip code do you live in? Put their zip code in, and it pulls up a bunch of resources. Well, what service are we looking for? So you could do like a short assessment in LinkU, and then say, okay, well, when you return back to Iowa, I've connected you to blah, blah, blah. They're expecting you on Tuesday, right? You know, this is something that Tawana and I have talked about having too many systems and the confusion that causes, right? And so LinkU, in my mind, right, is down the line in the future, maybe a system that we can all use across the board, right? And Ron, you know, I can see the work you're doing in there. You can see some of the work that I'm doing there that is not HIPAA, you know, that doesn't violate HIPAA, right? But we can see how the interactions is going. So right now, what we've done is we are going to fully launch LinkU on November 1st. We sort of been piloting it since beginning of July with certain CBOs, and it's going very well. So we're at the place now where, you know, because prior to LinkU, it was picking up the phone and saying, hey, I have so-and-so here and blah, blah, or sending an email. That's not a good way to track this, right? But when LinkU, I go in there and make a referral. You on your end receives that referral. You make notation. JK showed up. I gave him 2 pounds of food and blah, blah, blah. Oh, in addition to that, I realized that JK needed some socks. So I made a referral to Martha's Table, right? You see how I can now track what's happening with this person, right? And so that's what I'm pushing everyone in our system to get on board with, because now, again, we can track everyone. But for our government sister agencies, because of HIPAA, we use Apricot for now, right? Until we can get to a place where we can probably block off some of that PI, some of that personal information that is protected.
Thank you.
Were there any other questions for JK as we start to wrap up? This was an awesome presentation. I think it really brought a lot of insight to everyone and gave us a lot to think about. But and Dr. Somerville, hopefully you'll be able to organize a tour soon. But I really like that simulation that you were talking about, JK. I think that would be the cherry on top of just really understanding everything coming full circle. We'll have to talk a little bit more and see if there is a virtual opportunity, but if we do have board members that are interested, maybe we can split it up into like 2 or 3 groups and have a couple of different dates that people can sign up for. Were there any other questions or concerns for JK?
Yes.
Hello.
I have a question. You having someone? Can you hear me?
It's a little muffled.
Can you hear me?
It's muffled.
Okay. It's still muffled. Am I being heard now?
Right, Raheem, I think whatever device
Can
you
you
were
hear me?
for your last
Okay, don't worry about it.
works. Or you can put it in the chat box.
Yeah, Raheem, I was gonna say type it in the chat box.
JK?
Yes.
Hi, this is Leslie Johnson. Thank you so much for that excellent presentation. I would like our subcommittee at some point, Walter, to talk to JK about the challenges that he has found in connecting with the BOP, because that is something that we have talked about, not only helping our returning citizens coming out of our Prince George's Correctional Facility, but also helping those that come from federal facilities all over the country back to Prince George's County. And it sounds like you're having some challenges. Unfortunately, there's not uniformity from one facility to the to the next.
No.
I know that. And so you would be a great resource as you go through it to help us to try to beef up how we service these persons coming back from our federal facilities as well.
Okay, great. I would love to talk about that. And definitely, I think there's other members from that Tawana and I work with that will probably bring to that conversation because they have more experience, dealing with, or I shouldn't say dealing with, but trying to figure things out with BOP. It is very challenging.
Right. So at some point, maybe we can figure out how we can all get together and discuss this.
Yes.
Thank you so much, AJ.
Thank you.
Yes, JK, can you put your contact information in chat?
Sure.
I'm in my charger. Thank you.
No problem.
Can you say what your the phone number or email is? Because I don't know if I can access my chat, but
Okay.
can you give your contact information?
Let me give you 240 476 0381.
Thank you so much.
And what we'll also do, JK, when you get a moment and send out your PowerPoint, we usually share it out with the board to review. We did record the session this time, so when the recording is available, we'll make sure to share that out with everyone as well. And then whatever contact information you prefer, I can include in that email debrief.
Okay.
So everyone can have it in writing.
Okay.
All right. So as we're winding down, I did want to just put in a quick word that the county council will be planning to invite a few representatives from the Reentry Advisory Board to speak before the council coming up in November. So basically, we'll be giving them updates on our progress of what we've done thus far and some indicators in the direction that we would like to move towards. Just so that the council is abreast of what it is that we're working on, and it could really help down the line when our recommendations do come out. It won't be, out of left field. The council will be engaged along the way. So we'll be reaching out to people probably in the next week or so, after the council member, the chair and vice chair, Walter and Judge Williams, come together and have a little bit more discussion on where to go from here. But I did want to just let you all know about that. And when that date is solidified, we'll be sure to send out that link to everyone to tune in and listen in. So with that, Nate, did you have any other things you wanted to share? I'm not sure if the councilman is able to tune in at all.
Just two quick things. One, I want to say thanks to you, Ashley, because you've done a ton behind the scenes, and I want everybody to know, how, and I think it's obvious how hard you've been working at keeping everything moving. And I also just wanted to bring your attention for next month. We have secured, thanks to the Thanksgiving holiday, we're going to meet a little bit earlier than we normally would on November 20th. and it would be at the same time. Of course, we will be sending out information and notices for you, but I just wanted to announce that now. And I also agree. I think it's been a great meeting and a great opportunity to see, what these two jurisdictions are doing and how we can compare and, and add some value to what we're doing. I think we're all seeing that there's, we've got a lot of good things already. And I hope that with this video, we'll be able to highlight some of the good things that we're doing as we, continue to bring additional services online for our communities. That's all I have. Ashley, if you or the councilman have anything else, otherwise we will adjourn until November 20th.
All righty. November 20th. Looking forward to seeing everyone on that next date. And until then, be safe and enjoy your weekend.
You all.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
All right, thanks everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Presentation.
Great meeting.
Fantastic.
Thanks.